So what I decided to do today was just talk a little bit about some SEO, do some demonstrations of some things that you can do and some explanations and walkthroughs of things, just things that I think people can take away, and some things might be helpful to some of you, some things might not. Hopefully, I like to think if I do a bit of quite a few different things, people will think, oh, this is useful. This is some of the stuff that I can take away. Thank you to those of you that have wished me speedy recovery. Thank you. I think, unfortunately, I might have some scarring for the long term. I don't know. So some of you might know that I run a scooter site called Scooter Guides, so that I'm using part of my helpful ranking recovery webinar series, because I've neglected the site, too busy with other things. The site got absolutely clobbered by the helpful content updates. But ironically, with all the work that I've done in the scooter industry, you would have thought I would wear a helmet before I went out. I didn't wear a helmet. I came off a scooter with no helmet going down a hill. I landed on my face and back of my head, and obviously now I've learned my lesson. Right, so first of all, what I'm going to do is I'm going to shut everything off so I can share my screen. But as with anything, I have like a million tabs and a million windows open. So I have in front of me, as we speak, I have a 10 monitor set up. So I have 10 PC monitors in front of me. So if you wonder why I'm looking around all over the place, it's because I'm shutting stuff across each of these monitors. Right, so I think that's everything. Right. So just to give a little bit of background and to sort of run through everything. So my name is Daniel Foley Carter, and I've been in the SEO industry since 1998, 1999. I've worked in the early to mid 2000s. I worked for some of the biggest SEO agencies that existed at the time. Those included Big Mouth, which became LBI Digitas. I subcontracted for agencies like iProspect. And in 2006, 2007, I decided to go and run my own agency. So I set up my agency, Assertive, in 2007. I ran that all the way until 2019, and then I stepped down. I still own a chunk of the agency and I'm still involved, but I'm not at the forefront of it anymore. I mainly oversee the SEO. So I oversee the SEO that's delivered by people, and I do a lot of the training. I launched my consultancy in 2019. Consultancy is not really the thing that I want to do anymore. I launched the audit business in 2022. It's been massively successful. And what I'm looking to do now is pass on knowledge, to share as much information as I can. I raise money from webinars, obviously, because it pays bills, and I also donate to charity. So if you do buy any of my content, it does help go towards a good cause. And effectively, I'm at the point now where, as for 2024, I'm going to be moving more into doing sort of mainstream events and things like that. So what I'm going to do today, I'm going to pick a project before I share my screen. I'm just going to decide on what project I'm going to use for this particular example. So if you just bear with me while I pick out a site that I can use. In all fairness, I may actually just use Scooter Guide for this, primarily because it's a really good opportunity for me to demonstrate one of my own properties that's been hit. Okay, all right. So I'm going to share my screen, and then I'm going to run through a couple of different things. Okay, so in today's session, it's completely off the cuff, completely random. I've got no schedule for it. I'm just gonna dive in and cover the things that I think would be useful and, you know, potentially be very important. You know, if you were in this position, anyone that's in the SEO industry typically is going to at some point have this scenario, whether it's with their own site, whether it's with a client site. And in all fairness, Scooter Guide's been like majorly neglected. So even in the last 16 months, Scooter Guide's peak traffic in the last 16 months is still significantly lower than it used to be. So I think at its peak, we were doing around 4,000 to 5,000 clicks a day. And it's just over time, it's deteriorated. And it's a real shame, massive shame, because I never monetized this site. And, you know, I understand the affiliate marketplace. I could have probably made quite a lot of money out of affiliate. But I think the issue for me is just I've had like so many plans. So anyone that's really enveloped in SEO, or, you know, someone that's getting into SEO more and more, will want to start with their own assets. So, you know, what my advice is to anyone that's actively, you know, within the SEO space, you need to have your own assets and you need to practice. And, you know, there are lots of things you can do. So, okay, so first of all, with something like this, if I have a site and the traffic's in decline, you know, generally one of the first areas that I'm going to start with is a click gap. So what I also want to do is whenever we do anything, okay, we're always going to start with a site crawl, and there's loads of tools out there. There's SE ranking, which is good. There's Jet Octopus, which is brilliant. You've got other crawls like other site crawlers like Lumar and things like that. By the way, as I go through this and people ask questions, I might all of a sudden abruptly stop where I am to answer a question. So just before I dive into this as well, so let me just explain, because someone has asked a question about webinar content, and I will just briefly explain what these things are and where to go. So if you are watching this and you are a beginner, or you're new in, or you're maybe 2 or 3 years experience and you know, you're not actively enveloped, or maybe you're not a faster learner. So one thing that I would say is in SEO, okay, you can have someone with 10 years experience or 3 years experience. The person with 10 years might be not as active in it. They might be a slower learner. So experience is really proportionate to how strong your own skills are for self-development, for data analysis. And this is one really important point with SEO. So SEOs will often suffer from imposter syndrome as well, where you see other people doing all this stuff and you might panic thinking, oh, you know, I've been doing it for this long and I still can't get. Don't ever think like that. Okay, I've been doing this for more than 23, 24 years now, and I still learn stuff. So you'll never stop learning. If you are where you would class yourself as a beginner or intermediate, you would go in here under learn, and you would go under SEO executive training. Okay. And basically it's £99 and you get all of the training sessions within it. So you don't have to keep buying it. You just buy it once. So far, there's 3 live sessions, which amount to 12 hours of training. And the next one is coming up in the middle of December. So you'll get access to ongoing sessions at no extra cost. And believe you me, you'll be getting a lot for £99. If you are more experienced, so intermediate to advanced, then you would use these webinars. So you would stay away from these if you're a beginner. They go beyond that. But intermediate to advanced, and obviously the bundle has like everything in it. So if anyone has any questions, beginner to intermediate, you go here, because the SEO executive training starts from like super basic and it gets more and more advanced as the sessions go along. Okay, right. So whenever I'm doing anything, let's say Scooter Guide was a third-party business and they came to me for SEO. Okay, so what I typically do is I work with a project management tool called Active Collab. Now, you can work with any tool, whether it's I don't know, you can use like Monday or Notion or anything like that. It doesn't matter as long as you've got a place to start. But what I would typically do, I'm just going to go in here and create a project to sort of simulate as if I was picking up something from new. Right, so I'm just going to create it. As if I've got a clean slate. So in here, I set up my project and I usually will create like a series of different things. So I have like a task list. I'll have SEO, usually SEO tech. I'll have content, links, brand, development, and SEO testing. Okay, so these are like the very top level areas where you have a subgrouping. So, you know, we know that SEO is an amalgamation of different processes. Okay, and SEO is obviously a multifaceted service because, you know, content writing is a part of SEO. It isn't SEO, but it's a part of SEO because obviously content is key. And, you know, then we'll have things that are SEO, and then we'll have things that are really genuinely about building strength in a brand, which is going to be really important. It's already really important, but it's going to become more important as time goes on. And then obviously development to implement things and improve things. And then SEO testing, which is part of our ERP. So the first thing that I'm going to do, let's just do crawl website. And I'm going to assign it to myself. And I'm going to start with a site crawl. So I'm going to pull up Screaming Frog. Now, I've used loads of tools over the years. What are the pros and cons? So what crawler you use is really dependent on its application. So Screaming Frog SEO Spider is one of the best all-round for small to medium-sized websites. Soon as you start getting to large, we're talking, you know, 500,000 URLs, 1 million URLs, Screaming Frog SEO Spider starts to become a little bit more unwieldy. You can find it crashes. You can find, I mean, it can handle them. What some people do is they set them up on a standalone server, and they'll run a virtual version of it where that server isn't running, you know, your day-to-day other stuff. But for most people, you know, Screaming Frog's good. Now, Screaming Frog is a desktop-based crawler, not, you know, it's not an online crawler like, you know, Jet Octopus. Jet Octopus is really good as well. I use that for larger sites. So the reason that I like this is because with Screaming Frog, you have full control of all of your crawl, all of your parameters, API integrations. You don't get this level of flexibility easily with all other crawlers. Some crawlers offer advanced functionality in terms of setting, but this will generally be your best bet all around. So if you don't use it, you can download it for free. And I think a license for it is like £100, £120 for a year. You can use it on as many machines as you like. And it's just all around brilliant. So obviously the first thing that we're going to do is we're going to open Scooter Guide. And for a long time, I need to disable Privacy Badger on here. This site has literally just been put up, you know, back my earlier days where, you know, I had more time for it. And a lot of effort went into building this. You know, I had like a full team of writers, loads of stuff was being done. But sadly, you know, it's just been left because I just haven't had the time. But I am working on recovery for it now. So as part of the helpful content webinar series, I am going to be working on recovery. Now, when I crawl a site, there are some key things that I'm interested in knowing so that I can set my crawl up. And these are things that you might find are useful for yourself. Now, again, the application and value of these is going to be entirely dependent on the niche. This is a publication, so the content on this site is predominantly informational. It's not transactional. It's not an e-commerce site. But e-commerce sites have blogs, so you could potentially do this. So one of the first things that I want to ascertain is, because this is a publication, what's really important is understanding, well, you know, what does the content profile look like over time? How old is the content? So one of the first things that I'm going to do, and I've lost Screaming Frog, where has it gone? It's here. Is I'm going to want to set up my crawl. So if you've got Screaming Frog, what we're going to do is we're going to click on configuration and we're going to click on crawl config. Now I'm going to give you some the whole point of this is a tips and tricks power session. So when you're doing a crawl, most of the time you don't actually need these things. Now, if your site is a JavaScript tech like React or Node.js or anything like that, then typically you'll want to crawl your JavaScript stuff, but you don't need these other things. And what I also want to do is I want to follow anything internally that's been no followed. And I want to crawl linked XML sitemaps. And you can use the auto discover if your robots text has that in there. So for example, we might find that in here. So we can see here it's referenced. If it's not referenced, then what you can do is just get your sitemap URLs and drop them straight in there. Okay. Little bit of information or context. So lots of people emphasize the need for sitemaps. Sitemaps are generally not needed for most websites. Most websites do not need a sitemap, just to make that clear. So people say, well, why have a sitemap? Well, sitemaps are typically there for sites that are much larger. Sites that have more complicated architecture generally will need a sitemap. Why is a sitemap or relying on a sitemap bad? If your website has content and you have lots of pages that are almost inaccessible, and I'll show you this as we go through this, a sitemap becomes relied on. If Google discovers pages via the sitemap and it can't discover them via the crawl, that's generally an indicator that, well, the content can't be that important. If I've got pages on my domain, you know, and there's barely any internal links to them, but it's finding them by default through sitemap, it means that the content can't be that important. You're reducing emphasis on content. And obviously, the less internal links a page has, the less link equity that it gets. The PageRank model, which is something that Google used to show you, still exists, but you can't visualize it anymore. So when we add the sitemap, what it will allow us to do is, if there's any potential orphan content where the crawler doesn't find it, but it's in the sitemap, it will help us to identify orphan content. And then with these ones, you can generally just leave them as they are. You don't need to do anything there. Now, for extraction, we don't need meta keywords. And to be honest, I typically tend to do two crawls. I'll do one where I just get like the tech stuff, and then I'll do another, you know, where I will get everything. So Marcus has asked earlier today, I struggle to crawl a multi-location website to identify pages with incorrectly displayed map embed. How can this be done? Marcus, if you can provide a little bit more context on that. I struggle to crawl multi-location website, identify pages with incorrectly displayed map embed. If you can send like an example or a page, and I will come back to that question and I'll take a look at it for you. So drop it in the chat and I'll come back shortly. So under page details, we don't need forms, we don't need page size, we don't need hash value, we don't need text to code ratio. You can leave these ones here. Typically in these ones, response time, you can use that, but for most people, you don't necessarily need that at the minute. Last modified, I would leave that. I would leave these. And structured data, I would tick all of these, because this will basically get the structured data and it will run rich results check. So it will validate them for you, basically. And then we don't need to store any of the HTML or any of the PDF content. Limits. Now, you would use this if you were crawling a huge website and, you know, there were server-side rules that limited how much you could crawl in one day. And there's lots of other things that you can do in terms of crawl limiting. But for most people, you're not going to need to limit your crawl. Rendering. Now, with rendering, okay, by default, rendering is text only. So what text only means is that Screaming Frog is getting the HTML, it's passing the HTML, getting rid of all the code, and then it will find links and it will find text. With JavaScript rendering, what it actually does is it renders the page as if it were looking at the page. And rendering is important because, and without getting too complex, when JavaScript-based websites load, sometimes the JavaScript will be responsible for loading the content into the page. Text only render won't trigger the script, so it won't see the output of the page. So if you're crawling websites that look like they are JavaScript based, and one way that you can do this, okay, is if you go to the website, press F12, okay, click on console, elements, click on elements, press Control-Shift-P, type JavaScript, and then click Disable JavaScript. Okay, and then refresh your page. If the page loads and you see all of the output content still, okay, and you do that maybe for a couple of the different page templates, then it's very unlikely that the website is using JavaScript client-side rendering, okay? If the website is using a JavaScript tech stack and you disable JavaScript, generally you'll see the page doesn't load any of the content in. So when we're doing rendering, okay, you can use JavaScript rendering because JavaScript rendering gets all of the text, whether there's JavaScript or not. But if you use text rendering, it won't. Okay, so what you'll find, if you've got like a website, a client says to you, it's built on SPA, single page application technology like React.js or Angular or something like that. If you try to run the crawl on a text only, you'll often find that it maybe will just crawl the URL you've put there and then it won't go any further, or it will crawl the sitemap, but it won't do a proper crawl. So if you're crawling like a basic WordPress site or something like that, you can leave it on text only. If it's a JavaScript or more complex site, you would select JavaScript, and these by default are fine. You can leave them. Now, for most of these settings here, you don't necessarily need to change any of these. Now and again, I'll always follow canonicals just in case there might be some other additional paths in there where a page isn't linked to internally, but there's a canonical reference to it. And then in preferences, these are generally pretty solid. You don't necessarily need to mess around with these. These are generally set by Screaming Frog because they'll just set what the typical definitions are, but you know, these can vary. For content area, duplicate, spelling and grammar, these things you can add in. So I typically will enable spell check and enable grammar check, just because you'd be amazed at how much content goes out. You're always going to find spelling mistakes on larger sites. Now, with robots text file, okay, what we actually want to do is we don't want to respect robots text. We want to ignore it, but report status. And the reason for that is someone might have used robots text to block a piece of content, but inadvertently, that content might actually be something that should be accessible. If we ignore robots but report status, then we can see all of the things that have been blocked and review them to see whether or not actually they should have been blocked. There are plenty of circumstances where I found people that have blocked things by accident, or someone's made the wrong decision, and I found it through this. URL rewriting, you don't need to touch that. A CDN, you don't necessarily need to use something like that, but these features are usable, and there are instances where I do use them. But I'm going to treat this as like SEO tips and power sessions for more general day-to-day SEO rather than more specialist stuff. So I will do some webinars down the line that are like focused at high-end stuff where, you know, we'll take advantage of more of this stuff. Now, include and exclude. Typically, I would use include if I want to specifically tell Screaming Frog that I only want to crawl these subfolders. So if I'm sometimes working on a larger website where there's segmented content, so an example of that might be, I don't know, so if I just pull up PC Mag. Okay, so sometimes what you'll find is they'll have sections of the website. So we have a pics subfolder, we have a reviews subfolder or categories. So what I would typically do is when I've crawled a website, if I'm going to audit a specific part of it, I may decide that I'm going to recrawl a specific part of it. And the reason for that will become apparent down the line. And that's to do with something called Search Console API. And I'm going to show you this in action. But the Search Console API only allows 2,000 requests per day. So sometimes if you've got like 100,000 page or 50,000 page website and it's segmented into subfolders, I do a crawl for each subfolder, and each time I do a subfolder, it allows me to use 2,000 API requests per subfolder. And the same, we can exclude URLs from the crawl as well. Speed, don't necessarily need to touch this unless if you're trying to crawl a site and you find quite often that it crawls 50 pages or 100 pages, then all of a sudden you get a load of server 500 errors where you're getting requests blocked. You would limit this, you would reduce the threads down to 1 max URLs per second, 1 or less. And that generally will be friendlier if someone's using Securi as a firewall or Cloudflare or something like that. Now, user agent, this is really important. Some websites will block user agents or user agents. So what this does is when you select a user agent, like Googlebot, for example, this is mimicking Googlebot. It's telling, you know, it's basically pretending that it's Googlebot so that it would be served with what Googlebot would be served with. But some CDNs and firewalls can detect spoofed user agents and things like that. So if you ever find yourself struggling to get a crawl going, test different user agents. You'll still get a similar output in most circumstances, but sometimes some user agents will work where others don't. So if you find that you're trying to do a crawl and it's not letting you, come in and change it. The one that I often find works best is actually Googlebot smartphone. Okay, but for now I'm going to use just Googlebot desktop. HTTP header, you don't necessarily need to touch this at the minute. Now, this part, custom extraction, this is probably one of the most powerful parts of Screaming Frog, because what we can do is we can actually take bits of template in a site and we can add them into the extraction. Now, many of you in SEO would have heard of Google EAT, helpful content. There's loads of stuff going around, okay? And typically, if we've got content that is informational, you know, and it's used, maybe it's research content, reviews content, or something like that, generally, we're going to want to have a way of identifying who wrote something. Okay, so you might find like some articles at the bottom that have a writer in. Now, we can do some really, really cool stuff with our custom extraction. So I'm going to show you one of these. So what I typically want to know is there an author and is there a date of when the content was published or last reviewed? So what we're going to do, before we do our crawl, we're going to create a custom extraction. So I'm just going to click on add. And the first thing that I want to get is article date. And what we're also going to want is article author. Okay, so let's get what's called XPath. It's just basically almost like an address of where a piece of HTML might be that's simplified. So what we're going to do is we can see here that there's an author. We can see here that there is an address, a date, sorry. So if we click on and press F12, I need to re-enable JavaScript. Okay, and we're going to click our little inspection icon here. We're going to go over the layer where my name is, and we're going to select that. And you can see here, there's my name. So what we're going to do is we're going to right click on that. We're going to click copy, and we're going to click copy full XPath. And then what we're going to do is in Screaming Frog, we're going to paste that there. And what we want is we want the text out of that. So from this HTML, we want my name. And what we're then going to do is get the author date. Sorry, that's my dog snoring in the background. Stop. Right, so what we're going to do now, really, I have a snoring dog. Yeah, she can make a lot of noise. So we're going to do the same thing here, and we're going to copy the full XPath. Oh, no, don't want to see me. And we're going to put that in there as well. Okay, so under article date, we're going to paste that. We're going to select that. Now, we can do this with anything, absolutely anything. Okay, so if there is an element on a website that's recurring, like an article title or a feature, I mean, you can even do it with chunks of text. You know, I might even want to say, is there a bio? So typically, most websites will have a series of templates. So you'll see it, you know, when you have a WordPress blog or WordPress article, you know, they will have the same template over and over again. So when they have a template, that means certain blocks of the page are going to be there within that template. Okay, so I'm going to get my bio. And we're going to copy the full XPath here. And we're going to do author bio. I'm going to paste that in there. And you can do this to get loads of useful bits of information from your page. Now, I could like add loads more to this, but again, this is a power session. So I'm just going to give you top level. There are loads of other examples we can do. Now, the next thing that we're going to do is once, you know, we've selected the data that we want to get, the next thing I'm going to do is I'm going to use the API for Search Console. So I'm going to click on here. And I'm just going to find Scooter Guides. Okay. So I've selected Scooter Guide. You'll be given the option to connect to your Search Console. And I'm going to click Search Analytics, and I want the past 12 months. Leave all of this as it is. And then I'm going to click URL inspection, and I'm going to click Enable URL inspection, ignore non-indexable URLs, and use multiple properties. Okay. And that effectively is that. And what we can also do is we can hook up Universal Analytics and GA4. And this is actually something that, you know, I would say is important to do, because what we can do when we hook up, you would use Universal Analytics, even though it's been sunset now, because you want to get data for the last year, 2 years, 3 years. Obviously, GA4 for most people they don't have enough data. So I would be saying, you know, I want the last 3 years of data. So whenever you go into Universal Analytics, you can sign in, you can basically select your URL. Okay, select it and then choose your segment. You would leave it on there. I would typically do custom, and I would probably do like 2 to 3 years realistically, because you want session data, average session duration and things like that for a longer period of time. And then obviously you can set everything here. User and session is set by default. These are all set by default, and typically you don't need to change much of this. I do change it depending on the site, depending on the engagement stuff that I want. And then obviously, you know, there's authentication there if you're doing on a staging site, needs a login or anything like that. And, you know, typically I'll hook up Majestic and Ahrefs as well. Okay. So we've now set up our crawl, and what we're going to want to do is drop our URL in, and we're going to let that run. Chloe, Scott. Also exciting news just while when I'm here. So I think maybe at the end of December or early January, I will be moving back into the office. So I've been working from home. I shut both our offices down in 2019 after COVID. We'll be moving back into an office either end of December or early January. So I will have a nice big green screen, and it will all be professional, not me cooped in a small room with a snoring dog in the background. Right, okay, so we've got a crawl, and we're just going to move this aside because it's probably going to take a little while. So we'll let that do its thing. And the first thing that we're going to want to do is we want to do a click gap. So for me, a click gap always is one of the first places that I'm going to start, even if traffic is up, down, whatever it is. And there's a good reason for that. And that's primarily because traffic can be going up, but you still might have content that is dying, but the overcompensation hides that. Okay. So SEO is the sum of always the sum of multiple parts. Right. So what we're going to do is I'm just going to open another sheet. Okay. Now you might be wondering why I've opened this in a new Chrome instance. So whatever profile you're signed in on in Chrome, and if you're not in Chrome, then obviously I don't think this will impact you. But if you're in Chrome, you'll see your account needs to match on both. If it doesn't, so if you look here, you can see my main account, and then you can see my auxiliary account. They're not the same accounts, so it won't work. So what you have to do is you have to do this, and then you have to open up your spreadsheet, and we're going to do scooter guides, CGA, and indexing analysis. So CGA, I'm a man of abbreviations, and it drives people up the wall. So I'm going to de-abbreviate it to click gap analysis. Okay, and we have our blank sheet. So the first thing that we're going to want to do is get all of our URLs for the site. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to click on extensions, add-ons, okay, and then I'm going to click get add-ons. Now I've already installed it, but I'm just showing you what you would do. And then you're going to go in here and you're going to type in search analytics for sheets, and you're going to select that. And then you're going to install this one here, okay? And just remember, this is recorded, so you can play it back at your own speed and pause it and do whatever you need to do. So you're going to install that, and then when you've installed it, you're going to click on extensions, search analytics for sheets, and you're going to click open sidebar. And you're going to wait. And then what we're going to do, we're going to put in scooter guide, and you're going to select your domain property or URL property. Leave it by default. It defaults to the max available date range. And then what we're going to do, we're going to click group by, we're going to click page. Okay. And then we're going to change rows returns to everything. Now, the free version of this used to be free for everything. And then all of a sudden they've started charging for it. The free version will give you to 25,000 rows, which for most smaller sites is enough. If your site has over 25,000 pages, then you're going to need to buy it, but it doesn't cost a lot and it's really worth having. And so you're going to have it set like that, and you're going to click request data. And what this is going to do is it's going to get every single URL for the last 16 months. Now you might say, well, Daniel, just export it from GSC. Well, you can't, because if you export from GSC, you hit the 1,000 row limit. So if we look here, I've got 11,130 URLs, okay? Whereas in the export from GSC, I've only got 1,000 URLs. So you can't do it by exporting via the standard route. Okay, so we're just going to bring our sheet back. And what we're going to do is we're going to change the name of this to GSC click data. And what we're going to do is we're going to call this sheet full site crawl. And this will be where we obviously dump our crawl from Screaming Frog. And this is where our click data is. And the first thing that I'm going to want to do is I want to build a parent click gap. So for me, what I want to understand is where are the wins, where are the gains, and then I want to start segmenting out my strategy. So first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to take all of the URLs. Now, this isn't actually the way that I would do it initially. What I would typically do is I would wait for the crawl to finish. And what I would then do is I would copy all of these URLs. Okay. Then what I would do, and I'll explain why I do this, I would come to the full site crawl, and column A is always the URL when you dump the data out from Screaming Frog. I would then copy this column, go to click gap, I'd go to the bottom, add, sorry, I tell you what, G Sheets really is, I don't know how they didn't get someone to test this, but it's really, really frustrating. Like, I want to add a row to the bottom. Okay. Then what I would do is I would paste. Okay. And you might say, well, why would you paste the crawl when you've got all the GSC URLs? The reason is that you might have URLs that aren't indexed. Okay, so GSC is only going to spit out the URLs where there's index data or where there's been index data for something. Whereas your crawl might include a load of URLs that aren't indexed and haven't been indexed, and therefore you would miss them. If you combine the crawl and the page export, and then you select the column, and then you click data cleanup, remove duplicates, what it will do is it will get rid of the duplicates between the GSC export and the full site crawl. So you end up with a full list of all of the URLs that exist. Okay, you're not missing anything. And this is another really good way to catch any of those orphan pages. Okay, so let's pretend we've done that. The only reason I can't do it is because the crawl is probably going to take a little while before it finishes. Hopefully it will finish in time for us to start using the data. What I may do is just end the crawl early and pretend that like it's the full crawl. So the next thing that I want to do is I now need to go and get my click data to do my compare. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to do 3 months either side. So now, again, because this is like a short power session, I'm I'm sort of rushing, so I might not get the dates exactly aligned. But when you're doing this, you need to make sure that the exact amount of days are met either side. Okay, so we've got the 12th of July 22. So we want 3 months. So 1 month, 2 months, 3 months. Okay, so let's just pretend that we got 3 months on the dot, which we might have done. Oh, I just realized that should be the 3 months. Okay, so that's 3 months worth of data, and then we're going to export it. And then what we're going to do, we're going to call this last 3 months 2022. And there's all the data. And then all we're going to do is we're going to change this to 2023. Okay, so we just change the year. Okay, so we've got the exact same time frame. Not always the fastest thing. I'm going to rename this last 3 months 2023. Okay, so we've got our URLs for both years, and what we're going to want to do is we're going to want to put so we're going to get the values for these URLs between 2 different years. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to freeze this row, and what I'm going to do is just get the VLOOKUP code, so it's quicker than writing it. Okay. Okay, so this is the code that you need. I'm just going to write it out. So this says what value are we looking at? So we want to take this URL and we want to find how many clicks it had for 2023. So what we do is we put the sheet name in there. As you'll see, it says last 3 months 2023. And then we want to put number 2 there. And the reason for that is what we've said is find this URL in this sheet. And when you find it, get the value of the second column, which you can see is here. Okay, so this is column 2. So whenever you're using a VLOOKUP and you need to put the column index, you can just select the column header and then see what the count is. So using column 2, we get our clicks for this URL for that year. And then all we're going to do is we're going to Control A, Control C, and we're going to do the same for 2022. Just change the year of the sheet. Select these, centralize them. And then all you're going to do is you're just going to double click that. And this, you're going to double click that. And we've now got our values, okay? And the benefit to doing this is that we get it over thousands of URLs. Now we actually want to see what our click gap is. Okay, so we take our click gap and we want to subtract one from the other. So we want to take that away from that. And you'll see that we've got a negative value. So when we've got a negative value, it just basically means that there is a loss. Oh, so someone raised their hand. I'm not entirely sure what comes after that. So it doesn't actually, it just says someone raised their hand. Again, if anyone has any questions, just put it in the webinar chat or the question and answer section, and I'll reply to it shortly. Okay, so here we go. So we've got our values. And what we want to do is we want to do the same for impression. I actually just realized we should have called that clicks. And I want to do the same thing for impression. And then position. We don't need to worry about CTR at the minute. And all we're going to do is change the index number. So if you remember, impressions was the third column. Okay, and then we're going to cascade those down. Then we're going to insert a column for impression gap. And I'll explain why we want these. So subtract that from that. And then what we're going to do is lastly, we'll get the position value, which is column 5. And column 5 again. And we're going to cascade those down. And then let's format these as a number. So select both the columns, click format, number, custom number format, and then just select this one. And then you've got that. And then lastly, position gap. And we can cascade that all the way down. Okay, right. So we now have a very top level click gap, but we can also look at the relationship between click losses, impression losses, and average position losses. These are important, and I'll explain why. So, for example, you might have something that only exhibits, a very small volume of lost clicks, and you might see that, it hasn't lost any impressions, or it might have even gained impressions. You can have low-level click loss, and it not really be an issue with the page or the content or rank. So typically, if you see click loss, impression loss, and position loss together, that's generally a much better indicator that the page is suffering. Like, you could look at one factor and say clicks are down, that's a decline. But the clicks might be down a bit. The impressions might be sustained, which might mean that the page has just slipped in rank a little bit. So it's still being served a lot, which is how it retains impressions, but it's just lost clicks because the average position is slightly lower. Now, what I typically do is conditional formatting. So we're going to select that, and we're going to click Format, Conditional Formatting, and then we're going to basically select anything less than 0, and we're going to put it in red with white. And then anything greater than, we're just going to put it in green. Okay, and don't worry about the value items for now. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do the same thing here. So less than 0 is red, white, and then greater than 0 is green. And lastly, so typically a position gap works inverted. So if the value is plus, that's a bad thing. So if we do greater than 0, it's red. And then less than 0 is green. And this makes it visually easier to start looking across to see, if something has exhibited losses across the board. Okay, so we can see here that this has lost a sizable volume of clicks. We can see impression gap. We can see position gap. Now, what I'm going to do is show you something else that's really cool. Just bear with me 1 second. Now, one thing that I like to do is I like to understand the degree of click loss. Okay. And we can segment, we can start sub-filtering, and we're gonna do that shortly. But what I typically like to do is I like to use Chat GPT to help me write conditional scripts. Okay. So what I would like to do here is create percentage loss. Okay. So something like this, I would just say, so we want to calculate so between cells in column B and it doesn't always get it right. Sometimes you have to paraphrase or rephrase it. Okay, so if we do that now, one thing, and this does happen, is that it can calculate the percentage wrong. Just so you know, Marcus, I did see that. I will come back to you on that. As what I'll do, anything that's like a little bit more detailed, I'll come back to it towards the end. So effectively, what we've got here is our percentage loss. So we can click format, number, custom number format, and then we can select that, which doesn't seem right. So we'll do format number. Okay, not entirely sure why it's done that. But anyway, what I would typically do is calculate the percentage loss. So effectively, what we can do with the percentage loss is then band that percentage loss. So we can use a way of being able to say like high loss, medium loss, low loss. And then we can use that. So I'm just working out. Bear with me 1 second. It's I'm actually just seeing if that's worked out correctly. Yeah, no, I can see that they're already like that, but I wanted to reduce the percentage down to 2 characters. Anyhow, okay, so then when we've got all of these things and we're there, what we're next going to do, and typically what I'll do is I'll click data and I'll create a filter. And then from here, what I want to start doing is pulling in other values as part of our click gap. So some of the things that I want to know is the page still active? Okay, so it might be that whilst there are clicks for both periods, if there's clicks for both periods but the HTTP status is not 200, yeah, okay. Yeah, when it comes to like Google Sheets formatting, I just select that, but I don't typically use that. I just use the filters in the main format menu. So I'll be completely honest, like, I know my way around SEO. I use Google Sheets day in, day out, but sometimes when I come to like using certain formatting things, I'm not overly great at that. So anyway, so the first thing that I want to get now is I want to get the HTTP status code. So let me show you a script that you can use. And I'll show you how I use it, okay? So I have a sheet, a script, and it's called get HTTP status. Okay, and I'll share this script. So I use this and I'll copy and paste it. And then what I will typically do is I will copy my URLs and I'll paste them. Now, the reason that I'm not doing it in the same sheet is because when I try to do it from certain accounts, it won't let me. And for some reason with this Google account, even though it's set to allow to run scripts, it just seems to block them. So on this account, I can run anything. So what I do is I paste my URLs in, and then what I'll typically do is I'll call this polled HTTP status. The reason that I call it polled HTTP status is because it's a live check rather than from a crawl. And then what I'll do is I'll use equals HTTP status code. Okay, so it's calling this script here. And then what it should do is it should go and get that HTTP status code. Sometimes you have to run and give it permissions to do so. Okay, so then I'll leave that to basically poll and go and get all of the HTTP status codes. And that will get the live HTTP status codes if it decides to run. I think because I'm running a webinar power training session, it's decided that it doesn't want to run, which would be sod's law. Oh no, there you go, it's ran. So it's just slow. So I'm going to double click that. That's now going to go and get all of the live HTTP status codes. So it'll probably take a few minutes. So we're going to move that out of the way. So let's check on our crawl now to see how our crawl is how our crawl's doing. So we're making good progress. We haven't got too much longer until that crawl's done. Now we do need the crawl to finish to be able to go any further with this, because some of the other things that I want to know is how many unique internal links exist. Because obviously, you know, there might be a correlation between a page that's lost a load of weight and has one internal link. So we want that. Typically what we want to know as well is word count, so how much content is on the page. Then we want the index status. So you remember we hooked up the GSC API. So the GSC API will basically show whether or not something is indexed. This can also be a great way on the crawl to find content that used to be indexed that no longer is. Days since last crawl. And then what we want is our author. Is there an author? And then article date. So what we basically do when we do our click gap is we're building the GSC data around our crawl data, and we're gonna blend this data together, and then we're gonna segment it, and then we're gonna take a look at, you know, some of the variables in relation to the crawl data. So what I may do is end the crawl prematurely. It will be missing some of the URLs, but not too concerned about that at the minute. In fact, what we'll do, so we'll park our click gap crawl there for a minute. What I can talk about are some of the other things before we come back to the crawl. So I'm just going to share another aspect to a content audit. Sorry, bear with me 1 second. My dog is just snoring and snoring and snoring. Like, it's so distracting. Right, so another thing, most people that know me, when I do a webinar on a Friday, I always have a lager. So this is Star of Pramen. So I always like to have a nice lager to finish the week. God knows I need it, although it does look bad because it's a giant bottle. But right now it's really hot in here, so lovely. Right, so our click gap is sort of there in limbo at the minute. We're waiting for our crawl to finish. So what I'm going to do, I'm going to talk a little bit about helpful content. Okay, it's one of those things where Google's helpful content updates have rolled out. I'm just going to get the dashboard up. Okay, so we have this here. So you can find this, visit this URL, Google search status dashboard, and you can see in here, got different updates. And all you need to do is just Control F and type in helpful. And then you'll see whenever they've run a helpful content update. And these helpful content updates have been pretty brutal for a lot of sites. Because I do a lot of auditing, I see all different things. I see some sites get absolutely wiped out. I get some hit. Some of the sites that I saw get hit by helpful content update have subsequently seen a recovery as a result of the November core update. There's stuff going on all over the place. It can be really challenging for people to understand. Now, one thing that you can do, and one thing that I'm testing at the minute, is the viability of using Google Bard and ChatGPT-4 with a couple of extensions to basically start looking at content. So one of the things that we can do is we can take Google's helpful content guidelines, which are here, and you'll see in here what they basically do is they list a load of things that you should be asking yourself when you've got a piece of content. So fundamentally, if you're asking yourself these questions, ultimately the answers that come out of those questions are going to dictate whether or not you should consider adjusting your content accordingly. Now, these guidelines are not arbitrary. They're not applied uniformly. Just because you believe that you've met most of the criteria still doesn't warrant your ability to rank. It's just a potential indicator. The biggest problem in SEO, and this is a massive problem in our industry, is people say one thing, but the actual fact of the matter is that in every scenario, these factors will apply in different levels, different weights, different keywords have different intent, which has different requirements. So, for example, when we talk about does the content provide original reporting, research, or analysis? Well, is that applicable to an e-commerce product category? No, it's not. So the application of these are generalized guidelines to apply to content. How they are applied really depends on that content. And what we can do, and we'll do this shortly, but we can actually take these and we can ask ChatGPT to assume the role of a quality rater, and then we can feed it these and ask it to spit out a matrix that basically will come out like this effectively. And this seems to be a nice, more even roundabout way of being able to take a piece of content that a writer's put together and potentially look for gaps in that content that we could address. Okay, so anyway, we'll come back to the helpful content side of things. And the reason that we'll come back to that is we could potentially look at where our click gap stuff has gone. So I'm going to end the crawl, and then I'm just going to export the data. I can actually get to it. There you go. And how far did we get? So we've nearly got a complete crawl. Okay, so what we're going to do, we're going to select the HTML, then we're going to export. And I'm going to open that crawl up. So you'll get your file, Control A, Control C. And then what we're going to do, we're going to go to full site crawl, and we're going to paste. Now, if you've got a large site, sometimes you'll have to paste it in chunks because it can cause Chrome to crash. Okay, so we're going to freeze the top row. This is just formatting stuff. Obviously, you format however you want. And then we're just going to select data, create a filter. Okay, right. So what we're then going to want to do is begin our VLOOKUP to start getting data. So we're going to go back to our click gap, and we're going to take that and we're going to adapt the VLOOKUP to get our HTTP status. So we're trying to get that, and we're going to refer to full site crawl here. And we need to find what column number it is. So it's the third column along. Okay. And then we're going to cascade that down. And if you look here, you'll see it is making progress, but it's still not ready yet. So we'll leave that for the time being. Now, the reason you might say, well, why are you running a polled HTTP status? Well, if a URL is missing from the crawl or the data set, the polled HTTP status gets the live status of what that is. So if there's any gaps, the polled status will fill that. So we want unique internal links. Unique. So you want unique in links as the column title, and that's column number 44. So we can literally just copy it, paste, and change the number. What I'm going to do actually is resume the crawl, and then I can update the export after. Okay, right. So we now want the word count. So we want word count and then index status. So word count is going to be here. So it's 34. So we're going to select 34. Then we want the index status. So we come all the way over, and you can see here's the GSC and GA API. So if you look across here, you can see, so the index status is summary between these here. And you can see it says URL is on Google. So that is 84. Days since last crawl. So 85, 86, 87. So 87. Then the author. So 87 and then 65. $65. And then the date. Right. 64. And then we can use, in some instances, we can use last modified as well. But again, not one that I would rely on. Okay, so there are other things in here typically that I would take. So, for example, session duration would be one of them. So 73. And so forth. Okay. And the reason that we do all of this, the reason we do all of this is because we're blending our gains and losses against other data that might indicate where there's a gap or an issue. So I'm now going to drag those down. And you can see immediately that there are issues. So like, you know, are they missing authors, inconsistent authors, loads of different things that we could be looking at. So, you know, we're now building up this data. Now, just so you know, like when I do a click gap, the data that I extrapolate into here will vary depending on the niche, depending on the client. You know, so for example, for some click gaps, what I do is, and this is a really good one, if you run an e-commerce site, use the XPath to get the number of products, marry that up to URL. So for example, if you had a Shopify site, you would get the XPath of the number of products, and then you would have your filter to select /collections /. Then what you can do is you can compare the volume of products that you've got to competitors. So for example, in a SERP, if you want to rank for something and you're not competitive at product volume level, it's a great way to find it doing this. Okay, so this is like basic top level data. So what I'm now going to want to do is I'm now going to duplicate this and I'm going to call it URLs lost clicks. Okay. So with this here, the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to set the click gap is less than. Then what I'm going to do is select data, sort range, click gap, and then A to Z. And what that will basically do is organize the biggest losses to smallest losses. Okay. So we can see here that across the board, we've got the volume of losses. We can see here that the pages have lost clicks, they've lost impressions. The position gap doesn't look all that significant. We can see the pages are active. We can see unique internal links, word count. So what I would typically then start doing is segmenting it. So I could say, well, the first thing that I want to look at is by HTTP status code. So I duplicate it again, and then I'll put HTTP 200. And then I would select that and basically only highlight ones that are where the page is still active. And then I would do ones that are not active. So I duplicate it and then select 301 and so forth. Okay. So I can see the declines are on here across here. Now, typically, what I would then also be looking at is I'd be looking at impressions next. So which ones had impression gain, which ones had impression loss? Because if something has lost clicks and lost impressions and lost average position, that is generally more of an indicator that something has started to lose more value. Whereas if something's actually increased in impressions, it's being served for more things, but it may have lost clicks because of average position slippage. So if we now enumerate that, so I start to abbreviate at this point because the length of the tab name. So then what I'll do is I'll segment by everything further. And you'll see here now, you know, we've got impression gap and so forth. Then what I would typically do is start drilling down. So I'll start finding things where the internal link counts are very low. So drill down further. And typically I consider 5 or less internal links is generally where I would start being concerned. Okay, so as we start going through, we can start going through and segmenting. So we can see that all of these ones here have got an author behind them. Now, the article date, okay. So the next thing I'd be looking at are things like, okay, well, we know this page has got a low number of internal links. We can see, you know, all of these pages have a fairly sizable amount of content. And we can see that these pages here are indexed and in Google. And we can see that most of them are crawled relatively regularly. So Google is coming back, and it is obviously still crawling them, but the value of these pages has definitely diminished. Okay. So then what I would do is I would start looking at segmenting them by year. So I would say, and then I could say, okay, well, you know, 2021, for example. And you could do this, you know, for other years. So 2021, 2022, and so forth. And what you end up with is you end up with a, no worries, Evelina. Thank you for attending. Again, anyone that has to drop out or anyone that's new joining, this is being recorded. So the full thing will be emailed so you can watch it at your own leisure. I've only got another half hour to 45 minutes, really. But I'm actually probably going to do a couple of these little sessions, just you know, a couple of hours here and there, just to share whatever tips I can. So then what we've got is we've got, you know, an overall picture. Then what I like to do is I like to create insights. So when I create insights, what I start doing is I start using ChatGPT and Google Cell formulas to start catching things and understanding exactly, you know, what's going on. So, for example, in an Insights tab, I'll just put loads of different things. So, for example, let's say we're going to do a click gap overview, and we're going to have URL grouping, URLs that lost clicks, URLs that gained clicks. Okay. So typically, you know, we can automate this. We can use cell functions to basically do it, or, you know, or we can do it manually. So if we look at the total volume of URLs that lost clicks, it's quicker to just go select the column and then look down here. Okay, so 896, but you take away 1 for the header. So 895 URLs lost clicks. And then URLs that gains clicks, we didn't create that one, so we're going to duplicate that. . . And we're just going to do this in reverse. Okay, so we've got 309 URLs. So the first thing that we can do is we can create a pie chart to get a better visualization. Okay, so based on the click gap, 74% of the website lost. Okay, so you know there's some compensatory factor here, but the compensatory factor is far outweighed by the loss factor. Okay, now this will potentially act towards helpful content evaluation. So there's a concept, right? If you have a pie, okay, let's say you bought a pie from the shop and you took it home, and let's say 3/4 of the pie has got chili in it and 1/4 of the pie hasn't got chili in it. And let's say you hate chili. If most of the pie has chili in it, you're probably not going to bother eating the rest of it. Whilst Google doesn't necessarily work that way entirely, what I have seen and what I have known from testing is that if your site has a larger accumulation of non-value content, it damages the entire site. So you might have a 1,000-page website. If a large chunk of it is exhibiting decline, loss, lack of engagement, indicators that the content is not good, it's going to drag down the good stuff that you've got. Why? And why would Google do that? Well, quite simply, people don't just land on a page and that's it. People sub-navigate. Let me give you an analogy. Keep this in your mind. This is really, really important. If I have a headache and I go to Google and I type in, and I'm sorry to diverge from what I was doing. I type in how many paracetamol to take in a day. Okay. And it says here, adults can take 2 500 milligrams 4 times in 24 hours. Okay. There's a bit of information there. Now, let's say I wanted to rank an article around how many paracetamol to take in a day. Now, not only would it be extremely difficult, because when it comes to medicine or anything that exposes people to harm, you need loads of trust signals. There's a lot of mechanics behind it. But fundamentally, right, if the site ranking here gave you the correct information, but then loads of other pages on the site contained incorrect or really dangerous information, that exposes the user to risk. Okay, so almost think of it like your pie has to be full of content that is good. It has to be, it has to be a positive indicator. There has to be trust. There has to be a positive indicator. If a site goes into free fall, like this is here, it's generally because not necessarily that the articles are bad, but the aggregated value in the site has been lost. So if a greater proportion of pages on your site exhibit decline, you can bet that that's going to have a snowball effect on the entire domain. Okay, because you'll see with a lot of core updates that the damage from them is progressive. Okay, now there are people that have like severe decline where they've got like 500 clicks, 1,000 clicks a day, and it just nosedives. They generally will have other things like AI content. They'll have like just something that's been massively devalued. But for a lot of sites that have a staged decline, will generally be a result of an aggregated evaluation of content over time. So we can see here from this, our decline has been progressive because it's just slowly died off, stabilized, and then died off again. Okay, this is not indicative of a bad, a terrible site. It's indicative of something where, do you know what? over time, this content's fatigued. It's not as relevant. It's not as fresh. Doesn't tick as many boxes as it used to. Now, when you see gurus, and I have to make this clear, I am not a guru in any way, shape, or form. I don't profess to be better than other people. I don't do any of that. I live in my own little SEO bubble, doing my thing. I love to rank stuff, but I will never sit there and say, do this for X thousand visitors in 24 hours, and they're out there, and I keep seeing them on my Discover feed. Okay. People that advocate churning out masses of shit, right, will cause you more damage in the long run. Yeah, sure, they might get a bit of a little growth spike because all of a sudden Google's picked up 5,000 auto-generated articles. How long do you think that's going to last for? And it won't last long. And not only will it not last long, it will just drag the site back to the point where it just can't rank for anything for a long period of time. Don't do it. Sustainable SEO trumps shortcuts all day long. So anyway, so what we're looking at here is the pie is indicative of more content is deteriorating than content that is seeing gain. Okay. So immediately I know when I'm looking at this that I'm faced with a big task. Okay. So if you repeat this task that I've just showed you today, and then you come to your pie chart, you may find, you know, depending on the composition of that pie chart, that you've got a massive legwork to do. However, if this pie chart was based on 10 pages lost clicks, 30 pages gain clicks, or it was inverted, like, proportionality here is key. So if I took these numbers away and then it was, I don't know, 50 pages that lost clicks and 10 pages that gained, okay, this looks worse. But from a proportionality perspective, it's much easier to deal with this level of content than it is to deal with this, okay? So proportionality in SEO is everything. You know, you could even go down to like URLs that lost clicks 10, URLs that gained 1. That looks even worse. But this is not a scale that's hard to deal with. But that is a scale that's hard to deal with because it's over a much greater volume of content. So you'd always keep proportionality in mind. Right, so now what we want to do is we want to ascertain, you know, we want to better understand, is there a hierarchy here that we can look at? So the next thing that I would start doing is typically I would segment by how much loss there is, okay? So I would take the percentage of loss and I would organize the percentage of loss in proportion to the click gap, because you could have something that lost 1,000% when it went from 100 clicks to 1 click. But realistically, if you look here, this lost 47%. There's a 47% change. Do forgive me if I've said that wrong. There's a 47% change. So effectively, you know, that might not look as bad as 100%. But if the page that lost 47% had 50,000 clicks, proportionally, it's a lot worse. So we can see here, this how to make an electric scooter faster page has suffered a decline. Okay, so we can see here the page is active. It's got a good amount of internal links. But you'll notice just down here, the third page down to have lost 1,500 clicks has only got 4 internal links. Okay. So there are things that you could do, like, you know, where we've put the low internal link counts, you know, immediately the first thing that I'm going to do is, as part of my recovery, I'm going to go and retrofit links into these pages. Okay. You know, then I'm going to be looking at the fact that, you know, were these pages that lost thin on content? You know, and obviously this site is a publication. So you can see here that most of the pages have a few thousand words on them. Okay. So I've now segmented all my URLs, and I want to understand what is going on here. So what is wrong with this article? So the last time that this was updated was 2021. So it's more than 2 years old since it was written. And initially it did really well. So what I would typically do is I'd start here. And we can see here, bit by bit over the time, it's lost ground more recently. But I know that this has deteriorated over time quite considerably. Okay. So we know that this page here has lost clicks. So what do we do? Well, one of the first things after we've done our click gap, and we come back in here, is I want to do something called query counting, and I'm going to explain very briefly what that is. So we open our search analytics for sheets back up, and I'm just going to add it to the end here. I'm just going to create a thing called query dumps. Usually I just do this in another sheet. And what I want to do is I want to get the queries for this page. So I'm going to select group by query, and then I need to add a filter for the page. So I'm going to select page equals, I'm going to paste the URL. Okay. What I want to do is I want to get last 16 months of queries. And then we're going to wait for that to get the queries. I can see that there's other questions in there. So all of the questions, I would say very shortly, I'm going to come back, circulate through them and answer any fresh questions on the fly. Right. So here are all the queries, and you'll recall in here, you know, we can see the trajectory of the page. And if we go down here, we can see we've got that problem with 1,000 queries. Now, also to note, the one other thing that I tend to check is search appearance to see whether or not there was any losses as a result of that. Now, we've got our queries for the last 16 months, and in total, the page has been served for 11,573 queries. So the page has got a massive long tail behind it. So what I want to understand is what's happening to the page. And I'm going to teach you about a very top level principle called devaluation and slippage. So if you just bear with me 1 second. Okay. So the real key points of decline are, we can see that in August, we were getting around 170, 180 clicks a day. And then if we look at August this year, you know, we're considerably down. So I'm going to compare. I'm going to compare these two periods. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to take the month of August, where clicks were at their highest in this data, and then I'm going to compare it to August this year. Sorry, not August this year. I'm going to take August when the peak was, and then I'm going to compare it to the last complete month where the decline is. Okay. So August 22, I'm going to take 31 days for August 22. You have to get the dates exactly aligned. So we're going to take 31 days, and we're going to get the volume of queries for that 31 days. Okay, and we're going to call this org 22 queries. And then what we're going to do is we're going to get the volume of queries. So the last complete month was October, where the decline is still present. So we're going to take 31 days from October this year. and it's 31 days. So it's a like for like in terms of the volume of days. And we're going to compare. That's a load. And I'll explain exactly what's going on here. And what I'm doing in the meantime is I'm just seeing if I can bring this up in something else in SEO Stack. Okay, so let's take a look at the difference. We can see that at the peak in the GSC data, 3,268 queries were served for the page. And that should have been October, sorry. And then in October, we can see 1,600. Okay. So let me explain why this data is crucial. And there's a couple of nuances. If Google understands the content and it understands the context of the content, it will serve your article to all the people searching for anything that it believes is related to basically what the article ties into. So the article is about how to make an electric scooter go faster. Now, Google BERT understands that you could search for different things, but it means the same thing. So what happens is that people might search for like how to hack an e-scooter to make it quicker. Okay, that is the same thing as how to make an electric scooter faster. You could have so many different ways of searching for what this article is about with different wording. Okay, so what happens is that when Google starts to understand the concept of what the article is, and even if bits of the article are relevant to the search criteria, Google will serve your content. The volume of queries that your content is served for is partly indicative of value. So what I mean by it, and you will see this, okay, the best way for you to see this, if you take a page on your site that is really weak, so let me just filter this because it's got tons and tons of jump links and things in it. So 1 second. Right, so if we get rid of jump links because they're all over the place, and then we go down. So if we pick this URL, does it load? Yeah, it loads. So if I now put that into Search Console, okay, this is an example of a page that shouldn't be on the site. Either it should be revamped or cold, okay? If you've got pages on your site that exist and they have this profile, that means they don't have any value, okay? And if you've got loads of pages like this, they are dead. They're never going to contribute anything. And I see nearly every site I audit has tons of built up stuff like this. Why would you keep something like that? Imagine if you had a loft full of books, videotapes, stuff that you're never ever going to use again, right? What is the point in keeping it? You're never going to use it. There's no point in keeping it. Content is no different. If you look here, this page in 16 months was served for 1 query. Because Google just doesn't see any value in it, it's not going to serve it. Queries can be used as an indicator of quality, okay? So we know that this page here has 1 query associated with it. So it's of no value. And typically, anything that is 0 click, where the impressions are low and the page is old, is stuff that is of no value, okay? And keeping it on your site, especially at volume, is damaging. You shouldn't be keeping this stuff. You should be getting rid of it. You might say to me, yeah, but Dan, we have to keep these pages because, you know, we've got loads of product pages that are dead. Well, you've got to rewrite all the content, because if you've got an index full of this stuff, okay, then it's not good. It's not good. And you'll even find it with low click. So you might find some URLs that have got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. What you need to look at is use the proportionality method. Low clicks, low impressions, or no clicks, low impressions. Those two things together are bad. You don't want them. So I can see here that there are URLs that have 7 clicks and yet 98 impressions. So yes, they've got a high CTR, but if we look, again, this is not of any value. And you can see here, look, 16 months, 9 queries, Surf4, 9 queries. And then our how to make electric scooter faster had 3,267. So I know between these two periods that there's been a massive shrinkage in queries. So the volume of queries that the page has got has shrunk. Now, some of you might have heard about me banging on and on and on about SEO Stack. Okay. I built SEO Stack for this exact reason, because what I was doing before with clients is I was trying to understand the difference between slippage and devaluation. Okay. So slippage and devaluation both exhibit the same behavior with clicks, but they have two very different meanings behind them, and I'm going to explain them, and then I'll explain about recovery. Okay, so you'll notice here what I did was I counted the volume of queries for August, and then I counted the volume of queries for October the following year. Right, but I had to do that manually. You imagine every URL having to change it month by month by month and do it manually. Enter SEO Stack. So what I did was I built SEO Stack. It's connected to Search Console, but it does all this for you. It will count all of the queries by month for every URL. And I'm going to explain why this is so important. And I advocate this. It's such a crucial thing as part of your SEO strategy, because if Google values something, it will serve it for more. If it doesn't value something, it will serve it less. Okay. So when you keep that principle in your head, you'll then start to understand. So I'm going to show you this URL that we were looking at because it lost the most clicks. We're going to take this URL. Now we already know that it's lost a significant volume of queries. So we're going to go to exact URL. And what this is now going to do is it's going to count all of those queries by every month. And then I'll explain what slippage and devaluation is. And then I'll explain, like, what can you do? How can you go about resolving it? And then I'll keep that at like summary level because I'm running out of time. But I'll explain slippage and devaluation. And these things are massively important to understand. Okay. So I'm just going to clear all of the things out the way. Right. You've got a page and Google's indexed the content and it's serving it for all of the things that are relevant to your page. This black line is the total volume of queries each month. So you can see here, December 2016, 4,000, 3,700. So this has counted the GSC queries for each month. Now, this has only got the last 12 months. If we go back, we can get a bigger picture. So most people in SEO, when they're like optimizing a page or they're creating content or they're working on a page, they want to get it ranking. And the traditional model of SEO is that people pick a keyword or a set of keywords and they want to rank for those keywords. But what a lot of SEOs maybe haven't cottoned on to yet is the fact that topical value is more important than keywords. Right. So we can see here for this page, we can see the history over a lot longer. So SEO stacks your GSC data from the day that you add it indefinitely. So whilst GSC will only give me data back to, I think, July 2022, in SEO stack, we have data going back to July 21. What we can see here is the page gaining weight in the volume of queries that it's served for. Now, let me explain a principle. When you create a piece of content and you put it on your site and Google indexes it, or let's say your page is indexed and you've updated the content, you're looking for the end result. You're saying, well, I updated this content, I should be ranking for these keywords. But SEO is a journey. And what happens is that once Google understands your page and the content in your page, it will begin to serve it more and more and more. So what happens when it serves it more and more? The volume of queries associated with the URL go up. But this can go up in terms of a positive response to your content, but it might not go to generate clicks for a year, 6 months after. It might take time. So what happens? If we look, this page is being served more and more and more. And if you look at the position groups that generate the impressions, you'll see that most of the keyword growth is stuff that's on pages 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Now, most people measure their success by clicks. Clicks are the end result of something that you've done well, but you're not seeing the journey beforehand. Now, if you use this in reverse, you can also use this to understand why you've got decline. So if a page is being served for more and more queries, that means Google is seeing more and more value in it. And as long as you've got your other trust factors, your links, and as the long tail traffic starts to build, Google gets data on how people interact with your content. If I could give any SEO's advice, wherever they are in their strategy, always shoot for long tail, okay? Long tail traffic is going to be more beneficial for you in going after your core keywords. Because what happens is, as your long tail builds and your page demonstrates that it's a good result, people coming in on long tail searches, they're exhibiting good user behavior. This is a good page, good experience. What's going to happen? It's going to strengthen your page to rank for higher level, shorter tail terms. What people do is they go straight to trying to rank for short tail. Don't operate that way. Work the other way around. This page took time to rank. So we can see here the total volume of queries went up and then it dipped and it came up. But we can see here that this is like the death rattle. Okay. So let me explain. If the volume of queries with a page goes down, 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 it's called devaluation. Devaluation is Google dropping queries and thinking that your content is no longer of value. If your content is no longer of value and it's being served less and less and less, that means it needs a complete overhaul. So you get these people, make your content, just change a paragraph, update the publish date to 2023. That's not going to do nothing. Google's used machine learning and behavior analysis to finally decide that your content is no longer worth being served. So doing tweaks and things like that are going to do nothing. Devaluation is the loss of queries. However, what you can have is something called slippage. Slippage is basically where you lose clicks, but your page keeps being served for the same or similar amount of queries. Okay, so what happens is that you imagine most of your clicks are going to come from positions 1 to 3 and 4 to 10. Now, if your page holds, excuse me. Is there another sneeze? No, there's usually never one on its own. If this black line, however, had like dipped a little bit, gone up, but it stayed relatively level, but it still lost all its traffic, what I would be looking at is slippage. So slippage is when queries lose a few positions. So the impressions are sustained, but the clicks are lost because the impressions are as a result of you appearing. But obviously, you being lower down the page, you can have lower CTR, lower clicks. So what happens with slippage is you might see queries drop from these two position groups, and you might see stuff. So if, for example, we saw the black line stable, and then we see positions, 30, 11 to 20 and 21 to 30 go up, but 1 to 3 and 4 to 10 go down, then that's indicative of stuff slipping out of the top 10 or top 3. It loses clicks, but the article hasn't been completely devalued, in which case you would then do a review of your internal links. You would take a look at parts of your article, which when we come back to this, when we're looking at helpful content, we might have lost slippage. So Google's not saying, this content's not of value anymore. Google still sees the content of value, but there are areas where, it's not quite up to date. There are subjective statements made in it. There are things that probably aren't as good, So devaluation would see you lose queries. And again, I'm not promoting SEO Stack here. You do not have to use this. You can literally avoid using SEO Stack by doing it manually using this process that I showed you wherever it's gone. So you would do this where you take a month, export queries, select the page equals, and then you would dump the queries out, and then you would just take a look at the volume of them. And that way you get an understanding. What I'm going to do, I'm going to pause quickly just for a quick toilet break. I'm going to come back, resume. I am going to have to do a hard stop, latest 5:30, 5:45. But what I'll do is I will get an invite out for another session, then I can carry on explaining in a little bit more detail. So I'm just going to briefly pause, and then I'll come back and then we'll carry on. Right, so I'm just going to mute and stop video. Right. Hello. I'm back to bamboozle you with random facts. Right. I now feel much better, and I've opened the window in here because it is unfathomably hot. Like literally, it must be mid-30s in here right now. It's like a sauna. Right. So back to this. Okay. It's because I'm in a small box room and I have a lot of I have a lot of stuff going on in here. So right, so can everyone still see my screen? All I need is one person to go yes, and then I can carry on. I usually kickstart and then people take a few minutes before they say, oh, we can't see your screen. Can you see? Brilliant. All right. So the logic, I've got so many tabs open now, I'm losing where we are. Okay. So keep this in mind. It's so important for you to understand, okay? Query counting should be part of your SEO regime, okay? Because it is an indicator of value. Clicks are the end result of something, okay? If Google understands the concept of your content and it values your content, it will serve it. If it doesn't value your content, it won't serve it. And that is very easy to pick out by the fact that you have pages that get no clicks, low impressions, and hardly any queries. Okay. One of the other things, so what I also decided to build was basically a way of like visualizing this across my whole domain. So I spent years ranking stuff in like stupidly competitive niches. And for example, just as a proof of concept. So if you Google SEO audits, I'm here. Okay. Yes. All right. I'm not the rich snippet. I get that. But this is an article, information intent. Mine's commercial intent. Okay. I've ranked for a lot of highly competitive stuff. Oh, my keyboard's dead. How do I rank for highly competitive things? Through my process that I'm showing you now. I mean, there's more to it than this. There's a lot more to it than this. But I'm going to drip feed my teachings around using this process. When you do an SEO experiment, query counting is how you measure if you are doing the right thing. It's crazy. Like, let me explain how crazy tracking rankings for a narrow band of keywords is, okay? Let me tell you why rank tracking is shit. Because you are creating an expectation for clients for a batch of keywords and generally ignoring the masses of long tail behind it. Now, a client could sack you off because they've got a 100 keyword ranking report and 90 of those keywords show no progression. And the client will go, do you know what? Spending money, not really seeing the results, bye. Not understanding that behind the scenes, you might have been literally creating tons of value, and all of that value is coming to the surface bit by bit, and Google's starting to serve loads of content for thousands of new queries. But because the clicks aren't there yet, and the client's looking at 100 keywords, the client doesn't see the value in what you're doing, which is why rank tracking is dangerous. You can track rank for all of the keywords that you want to rank for, but don't base decisions on that. Look at this. Look at what my screen says. Last 28 days for Scooter Guide, right? And look at the volumes. 1,200 queries, 409, 225. If I was tracking 10 keywords or 20 or 50 keywords, I still wouldn't be tracking a fraction of what's there. So what I did was I made it so that, you know, we could count queries at scale, and we could have a model where we implement something and then we have a way of understanding, is the thing that we are doing right? So I'm only emphasizing on this before you go, Daniel, just tell us, we've identified a click gap, there's a problem. Well, how do you fix it? Well, you need to understand this concept first, because when you understand the concept of this, then we can start better understanding some of the things that we could potentially do, and how we would benchmark that implementation versus reaction. And also the fact that, given obviously most of you, you're exposed to the SEO industry, the amount of misinformation out there is horrific, like really bad. Short-term SEO is bad. Overnight SEO is bad. All of this concept of, do things in 5 minutes, quick win this, instant that, just don't pay attention to it. If you want to progress your career, rank for good stuff, really progress yourself, stay away from that overnight stuff. And the reason I say this is because if, and I have other examples, recovery could take a year, 2 years. Like, it's not a joke. This stuff is hard, especially at scale. So if we look, and we have lots of missing query data for some reason. Okay. So if we look, we can see all of the URLs. There does seem to be some missing data for some reason. We can visualize, everything. So we've established that the page has suffered from devaluation. Okay, because again, to reiterate, devaluation, massive loss of queries, loss of traffic, loss of queries, everything dropping out, devaluation. Slippage, retained or similar queries, but lower average positions leading to click loss. Okay, and there's a big difference. Okay, right, so we're back to looking at 12 months. So if you look what we've got here, we've got loads of lines all over the place. So let me just explain really briefly. Okay, so if I whittle it all the way back to nothing. Right, so black line, total volume of queries. The black line is the sum of these position groups, okay, all added up. And we can see that positions 1 to 3 in July, 1,245 queries at position 1 to 3. And then by October, less than half of that. And at the same time, these positions are all dropping out. They've not dropped from position 1 to 3 and then 4 to 10's gone up. If 1 to 3 dropped like that, but we saw 4 to 10 go like that, then we would know that most of the traffic generating keywords had just slipped down the page. But we're not seeing that. Lost. So if we go through them, so this group lost loads of keywords, but they didn't slip to 4 to 10 because that's lost queries. They didn't slip to 11 to 20. They didn't slip to any other group. We saw a marginal increase on the volume of queries at 21 to 30, but the overall picture is complete devaluation. So when we see devaluation, as long as we can go back to our click gap, wherever it is. Okay, as long as we can go back to our click gap and we go, right, so we know the page is active, 276 internal links. So we know there's not an internal link to the page. The content is 2,658 words, so fairly sizable. It's indexed. It's been crawled in the last 24 hours, but it doesn't say that there's an author. It doesn't say there's an article date. Now, this is a good one. Take a look at that duration. Okay, so we have session duration and we have average time on page. So session duration is obviously for all of the pages that someone's visited in that session, and we have time on page. But given that most of these pages here, I think it's like 1.8 pages per session. So roughly that average session duration is fairly accurate of the amount of time on that page. In Screaming Frog, we just change it to time on page as opposed to session duration. But anyway, 44 seconds, it's not really long for an article that's nearly 3,000 words long. So typically when someone is searching for how to, and then we talk about electric scooters that have motors, batteries, controllers, I think you can pretty much say 44 seconds is not indicative of someone that's really engaging with this content. Okay, so there's more than 44 seconds worth of reading here, easily. So why is it so short? And what does that look like in proportion to the other stuff on here? Now, what typically we can see is that if lots of articles exhibit the same poor engagement, then that's indicative of a wider problem. And when we talk about Google helpful content, okay, helpful content is a more site-wide indicator. So if loads of pages on the site are all exhibiting crap user engagement, clearly the overall site is not going to be of value. And how is that reflected? It's reflected in a bigger portion of loss. So it's not even necessarily that, let's say in the standard SEO mindset, right, this page is broken, it's got low engagement, we need to fix it, we need to rewrite it, we need to make it really good. Not understanding that just fixing that one page isn't going to solve the problem. You have to address more of this pie in chunks in one go. Recovery is not fixing one article and you get it back. And what I try and teach in my webinars and in my SEO training is that think of everything that you do as collective and not isolated. If you have content and loads of it is exhibiting bad engagement, okay, low scroll depth, you can set it up in GA4 for scroll depth as an event, bad engagement will have a wider impact on the site. So when you think you're going to go in there and fix a couple of pages, revamp a couple of pages, chuck them back on your site and wait for that recovery to come, well, you've got another thing coming, because there aren't just these factors at play. If your article consistently over a long period of time has failed to do its job, and that problem is spread further afield, you haven't instilled trust in your domain. Okay, so you're not going to just come along and overnight revamp things and fix things overnight. You need a new strategy to start from the beginning. You take all of your content that has poor engagement, has other issues, you set it as a long 6 to 12 to 18 to 24 month strategy. You deal with it in chunks, and you work to not only make your content EAT, helpful content, align with those things, but you then need to have the mindset of maintaining this stuff. These people you see on YouTube and other social platforms advocating this mass output strategy, it's not sustainable, because how can you go back and constantly maintain 5,000 articles? You can't. So don't do it. Get more value from less content. It's easier to maintain and it's easier to scale your traffic that way. Right. So now let's take a look at the next part of this. So our page has lost ground. So what do we do? Where do we start? Well, the first thing is that the lead queries by click are really diverse. Okay. And that's interesting. We're seeing different models of scooter. Now you can see here that loads of the terms refer to speed hack. It just seems like most people are interested in speed hacks. Now, Google BERT, I forget how to go, bi-directional, I'll tell you what, I'll just Google it. BERT stands for bi-directional. Really? Hold on. It's going to make me look silly. Bidirectional encoder representations from transformers. Sounds so cool in SEO, doesn't it? Bidirectional encoder representations from transformers. Basically, Google can understand the concept between, you know, a set of words. So you could say faster is the same as quicker. So someone typing in a speed hack, effectively they want something to go faster. Speed hack, faster. So we can see here, there's a huge volume of speed hack terms, okay? But the article is based on how to make an electric scooter faster. But you wouldn't sit there and think, oh, I need to make the article focused on electric scooter speed hack. You don't need to do that anymore because of Google BERT and because of other factors. The fact is that Google understands the context of the search. So even though this article is not about a KCQ or a Youths or a Sencor scooter or a D8 Pro, Google is looking at the relationship between those things are scooters and speed hack, go faster. So what I would say has happened here is that Google has understood the context of what my content is about, how to make a scooter go faster. So it understands scooter, electric scooter, faster, quicker, speed hack, because they want something to go quicker. Quicker is a synonym with faster. But then what you start understanding is that when we look at SEO stack, okay, over time, we had this upward trend in queries. Okay. Wow, I've still got quite a lot of participants here. So hello to everyone that's persisted. I know sometimes these can go on for quite a bit of time. I literally, if I had my way and I wasn't busy and I didn't have plans this evening, I literally would spend like the next 6 hours with you guys because I literally love this stuff more than anything. It's so much fun. Right. So this page had a period of time where it was on an upwards trajectory. Okay. So it was gaining weight. Google understood the concept of the page. So it served it for more and more queries. For God's sake, I need to stop losing. This is the only problem when you have loads of monitors. Where's it gone? There. Okay. So if we put these side by side, right, what's happened is that as the content has been gaining weight because Google's seen the value in it, more and more of these queries have been served for. This is the page's birth, effectively, okay? But then we've seen substantial losses over time. Now, why could that be? Well, it's easy. The page is gaining weight. Long tail. What did I say about long tail? Being your route to user behavior to demonstrate whether or not something is of value. This has had time and it's been served for a wide array of queries. And what was the fundamental outcome of the people that came to the page? An engagement session that clearly was not indicative of people getting what they wanted. Like, you know, this is conditional. Articles and content length are proportionate to an end user's needs. Okay. If I typed in how many miles is it from the sun to the earth, 44 seconds of engagement on a page is amazing because, you know, however many thousands of miles it is, I got my answer. So a short session duration in that example is not a bad thing because I did my search. So every query will have an expected intent and behavior. And whether or not that intent and behavior is met is conditional on lots of things. So for example, Google is going to see this new content. It's going to value it. That content gets served for more and more queries. That more and more queries brings long tail. That long tail traffic starts to accrue. that behavioral data starts to accrue. And then over time, as loads and loads of people come to this article, they don't engage with it because they don't see the value in it. So what do? They go back to Google and then they go to the next article. And that pattern and cycle of behavior, when you've got Google using machine language, deep AI models, when you take that aggregated behavior, you can start to paint a picture of if something is good and of value. Now, if loads of your content is not doing its job, paints a bigger negative picture across the domain. When we're talking at this article level, what's happened is that article was born, deemed to be good, traffic goes up, behavioral data accrues, doesn't paint a picture of something that appears to be helpful or value. Content has had some changes. Sometimes you'll get partial reversion after core updates, or between core updates, they change one thing and it impacts another thing. But the overall trajectory of this page is down. This page is dying, okay? It's dying. And no tweaks are going to save this page, okay? It does not fit the end user needs. Now, recovery-wise, we can't get the same level of recovery back as it was before. Why? Because it's not just Google's evaluation of your content that evolves. Search behavior, SERPs, loads of things change, okay? What we're doing here is we can see all of these different models. Look, it's all different models being served for one article. So the problem is that people that have got a Kugu G2 Pro scooter, they're going to have all different components in their scooter to another scooter. We can't write the solution for all of these scooters into that article because there's probably hundreds of models in here. So the next thing that we can do is we can ask ChatGPT. Now, don't get me wrong. I love AI. It's brilliant. But again, it's not a replacement for common sense, and it's not a replacement for proper assessment. But what we can do is we can run a process that I've also been testing. Watch this. So what we're going to do, we've got the queries here for the last 16 months. Okay. So now what we want to do is let's take a look and let's take a look at exactly what's going on. So what we're going to do, we are going to take all of the queries and we're going to benchmark. We're going to benchmark some of the things that are going on here. Okay. So this is last 16 months for all our queries. So we're going to do and we're going to use VLOOKUP. So I'm going to take VLOOKUP. Just saves me having to write it again each time. And we're going to run a VLOOKUP to get this data and then run a compare. Okay. So we want to take the query A2 and then we want to look for clicks in all. So I've just got that the wrong way around. Hold on. Okay. Oh. You have to make sure you get this stuff right because otherwise it can be very easy to start misinterpreting data. And right, so we want to have a look in there for. I've just realized that as well. It should be what was 22. So wait, so no, right, okay, I'm getting confused now. Right, clicks October 23, clicks Aug 22. Okay, right, there we go, finally. So we're going to now change that to Oct 23. And then we'll do August 22. And we're getting, we need the second because we want the clicks. And then what we want is we want the positions. So I believe position is 5. Yeah. Should just be numbers. Plus 22. Okay. Then what we're going to do is cascade them all the way down. And what you'll notice as well is the sheer volume where there's something for August last year and not this year. Okay. So what I'm actually going to do, I'm just going to move these across, centralize all of these, and then create a filter. So we can see that positions have dropped for most of the other ones, and we can inject a column to conduct a position gap. But basically, you know, there are other things as well where we can see between positions lost and gained. Okay, so you can see here where the gaps are. So what you can do is you can duplicate this and call it queries lost. And then queries lost, if something is missing from this year, it will have the little hyphen. So you just select this, text contains, hyphen. And then what you want is you want to exclude hyphen from this side. And you'll have all of the queries last year that served with an average position that are gone from this year. And you can see just how many queries were lost. Okay. And then what we do is we flip it round and then we do queries gained. So okay. And we've basically flipped it round. So we can see the new queries gained, which is 871, and then queries lost, 2,503, which means there's a net deficit of over 1,600 queries. So what we can then do is using ChatGPT 4, okay, there's an add-on called Access Google Sheet. Now, this does seem to be hit and miss. So I was using it the other day, fine, no issue. And then I tried using it yesterday and it wouldn't work for some reason. So I'm going to see if it will let me access it. And if it will let me access it, then we'll do the evaluation now. Okay. So I'm going to ask it. Now, sometimes as well, it can get confused if there's loads of tabs in a sheet. So what I do sometimes is I'll create a new sheet and just copy the data set that I want analyzed into it. So first of all, Let's see if it can access it. Ah, right, okay. So it seems to be happy now. Okay, so one of the things that I would get it to do is I want you to help me perform an analysis. So we have to explain our situation. Explain situation. Actually, no, I'm not going to get it to do that. So what we want to do Okay, so basically what I'm asking it to do is I want it to take column A data from the compare periods, and I want it to try and ascertain, is there a specific pattern in queries lost? Is this something, so for example, we noted looking at those queries that loads of the queries are based on scooter models. Right, okay. So probably needs to dump it out into its own sheet. It does do this from time to time. So you'll often find it will say something about a sheet. So what I'm going to do, I'm just going to get it. So this was queries lost. Queries gained. Sorry, this is a little bit long-winded. And then compare. Take that as well. And that should be fine for it to analyze. it does play out. This process does work, and I've been using it, but sometimes you have to like just play around with putting the data and adjusting the sheets. So see if it will do that. If it doesn't, or if it decides to play up, I'll share a video separately of me doing it just because of time constraints. See if it will do it. Knowing my luck, whenever I present something, it just decides that it's gonna play French. Basically, what we're doing, we're looking for patterns in the data. So a really important part of SEO is being able to look at patterns in data. These things are intrinsic. Are we getting? It's deciding to play up. Let me see if I can. Let me see if I can show you one from the other day that I did. Oh, right. Is it now doing it? Oh, okay. All right. It's just deciding to be. The other way of doing it that might be better is actually giving it a sheet, a separate sheet for each tab. Actually, we might actually be able to just make it work by doing it in here. Let me ask if it can do a relationship analysis. So that's the right URL. Let's see if it will come up with anything. In the meantime, I'll just show you an example of one I did the other day. Yeah, so I've got it up so I can show you it and I can show you what the output is. Because this is not playing ball. Oh, it's actually come up with something this time. Okay. So here you go. So actually it's pulled up exactly what I highlighted. Speed hacks and modifications. A significant number of queries are about increasing the speed of electric scooters such as Carrera, blah, blah, pure. Strong user intent and bypassing the default speed limitations. Specific models and brand. Many queries are specific to certain models or brand. Firmware and software modifications. General electric scooter modifications. Potential shifts in user intent. Conclusion. Okay. But it does get deeper. So, you know, I did this and I was able to segment out theming queries, generalization, geographic relevance, long tail versus short tail, year specific queries. The thing is that this data all tells a picture. We know that the volume of lost queries is because the article is a generic article, and a generic article is no good for people that want specific electric hack, speed hack guidance for their model of scooter, because this article doesn't meet the end user intent anymore. Okay, so it's not that the article's bad. Like if you put the article into inlinks, surfer, pop, phrase, you put the article into most tools, it will score well. But this is the other point. This, and I tell you what, this drives me nuts. When people are like, create writing briefs for content. Oh, we want to rank for this keyword. Here's the writing brief. Tick all the terms in it. Bollocks. That's not how it works anymore. Intent is everything. So this article was born, didn't meet the criteria of all of the things that it was associated with, and it died. Can I recover this article the same way that it ranked before? No, absolutely not. This article will not rank again for the queries that it had. Even if I threw all my time and effort at it, it's not going to rank again, because Google served it. It clearly demonstrated that it's not a good fit. It will not be served for those queries again, because it doesn't address queries at end user need level. End user need level, what is the determining factor? The make and model of their scooter. So what would I do? I'd say, well, I need a compensatory strategy to recover this traffic, but not with a generic article. Now, I'm not saying that a generic article can't go on to do well again, but it's clear that even if I was to reapproach this and trying to get it to rank again, it would go through the same cycle. It wouldn't be sustainable. So we can see here common themes and patterns. So what would we do? We would say, okay, I'm going to create a cluster around electric scooter speed hacks. Okay. And then that electric scooter speed hacks cluster will have make, model, and specific instructions for hacking the controllers or whatever the firmware hacks are for that scooter. Okay. So the queries that are lost, right? So if we take that, for example, and we look, we can also see video. So the other thing that we need to take into consideration is that, as I said earlier, it's not one thing that changes. It's multiple things. Our article could be dying, losing queries because it's no longer relevant to the end user query. At the same time, Google could be shifting the SERP, and now clearly we can see a video. So how many of our scooter searches are going to be better met with a video? And look, we've got one article here, video, video, video. UGC, video, video, video. Okay. But this stuff is so crucial to understand at scale. So, like, I see loads of people complaining that Reddit has gone from strength to strength. People going, yeah, but Reddit content's crap, blah, blah, blah. But it's not. In many cases, it's not, because someone here who is an Aprilia ESCR2 owners, you've got owners here that will probably share experiences between one another about speed hacks. So you've got multiple threads, UGC content, yeah, probably lots of stuff in there. Then you've got videos. So this is like the whole point, you know. And I'm going to have to, unfortunately, start wrapping up because I've run out of time. And I literally, it really bugs me. I wish I could be doing this for the next couple of hours. I'd go and get another 2 of these, and I would sit here and we would spend the whole evening together, and I will literally carry on going as far down into the rabbit hole with this as possible. But the end result is that you have your expectations met whenever you are presented with a site that has gone through decline or suffered, or a page that you've got and you cannot seem to get it to rank. The more and more you decompile this stuff, the more and more you begin to understand about the mechanics of it. So my point is that, you know, today we took a page, we did a click gap, we paired up some basic stuff, word count, internal links, author, dates. There are so many more things that I want to go through, like the process of EAT and helpful content auditing, how these things work. If you guys are new to my content today, go and check out this. So the one that will probably be most beneficial are these two here. Google Helpful Content Recovery, this one here, and the SEO execution. These two here are really detailed. This one's 12 hours. This one, part 1 is ready. Part 2 is next Friday. So if you want to learn more about like the whole process and stuff like that, it's in there. If you want to use SEO Stack and you want a little bit of time with me next week, just drop me a message. If you want to come and test SEO Stack, and if you want me to give you a bit of training with it, let me know. I'm going to do another one of these like little power sessions for free that you can come and join, and I'll run through like more of the process with you and some other tips and tricks. So, right, I've got a couple of questions in here. I no index my past events as they are no longer of value. Does it too bring down my performing pages? Generally, if you're telling Google that you don't want something indexed, that is a sign of you actively instructing Google that you don't want it to be indexed. If something is no indexed, it won't typically have the drag down effect. But that being said, if you've got a website and huge volumes of the architecture of that website are no index, that isn't a good scenario. So no index is fine if you have like archived events and you keep those away from your main events. And as long as those things that are no index don't have a heavy internal link saturation, that is generally fine. How to cull dead content? Is 410 option good? Very good question. So if you get rid of content on a website, here are the things that you absolutely need to do. Right. So if we have a page on our website, okay, let's say we have this page, okay, and it has so let's say it has no clicks, 95 impressions, and let's say it's 24 months old. Okay. So we know that this page is dead. Like I'm only using this as an example. So the first thing that you're going to do is remove all internal links. Okay. So the first thing that you do before you cull any content is you remove all internal links to that content. How would you do that? Easy. You take your URL that you want to remove. You crawl using Screaming Frog. Okay. So you have to just use Screaming Frog. Make your life easier. Okay. You crawl your whole site. Then what you do, the URL that you want to remove, you click in here, you paste it. You hit enter. Click on it. And then you're going to scroll down to this tab here in links. And this will show you all of the URLs that are linking to the content that you want to remove. Do not redirect the URL yet. Here's what you do. You're going to remove all internal links to that content. Because you're going to cull the content, you don't want internal links to remain there. And you might say, yeah, but if you put a 301 in there, you can just send people that click on it to something else that's relevant. No, you don't want to do that. If you 301 to a URL that you've removed, you keep that URL alive, even though it's not there anymore. And it's just messy. Don't do it. So first thing that you do, remove all internal links to that content. Second, you check traffic sources in GA. Okay. So you go into acquisition, you filter down, and you see, is this page getting traffic from Facebook, Instagram, Reddit, Quora? Is it getting traffic from somewhere? If it's getting traffic from somewhere and the page is dead, then consider a revamp for the page, or consider no index follow. That way the page can persist, still gets contributory traffic, but it's not as much of a blight on your strategy. If it doesn't get any traffic, then the next thing that you're going to do is you're going to check to see, does this page have any external links? So you're going to head over to Ahrefs. You're going to sign in, which will use 500 credits. You're going to paste it in. If there's no external links, then you go on to HTTP 410. Because there's no external links and you've removed all the internal links, and the HTTP 410 tells Google, this page is not here anymore, it's not coming back, Google will drop it. And you're not wasting equity or anything like that. So that's the best way to deal with that. Deleting pages if they don't rank at all. We have tons of pages that don't rank at all, but they might be beneficial for our users that are already on the site. In your opinion, when is SEO more important than user experience? I doubt we can go back and optimize all these pages for SEO to revamp them. Is it worth deleting thousands of pages? Well, no, this is where index control comes in. So a site can have pages that are there for user experience, but shouldn't be indexed. Now, what I like to recommend is what's called a progressive strategy. So if you've got a site and you have thousands of low value pages, what I typically do is I no index follow, and then in batches. So let's say I had like 5,000 products and loads of these products, Google's not indexing them, or it's indexed them, but they're just dead. They don't exhibit any value. Then typically I no index follow them. I will batch rewrite in chunks, and then I will deploy them in chunks and allow them to be indexed. You don't need to delete pages that are not of organic value. Obviously, Google understands there are other traffic sources, social media, for example, PPC. But the general consensus is the indexable portion of your site needs to be the portion of site that is of value. The spreadsheets are complicated and way beyond my skills or patience. Can I just pull data from GSC for the best month and worst month for a URL? Then what do I focus on to improve the content? Lost LSI keywords if applicable. So it is hard to answer that one. If you watch the recording of this and just repeat it, you will become a lot quicker at doing it, hyper efficient. The other solution is about to be deployed, and I will show you. The solution is coming. So all of the processes that I exhibit and share with people now, I am working on them. So if I just show you. So I showed you SEO Stack. Well, this is SEO Stack version 2. This is the professional version that is going to go to public very shortly. It's end stage testing now. So we're going to release to the public as soon as the UAT team sign it off. It's going to go out. And what this does is basically, this will do a lot of the things for you. This will automatically take pages. It will automatically use AI to calculate query loss, query gain, query value. This is basically going to take all of the things that I've been teaching people, and it's going to bring a degree of automation to those things. This has been a massive undertaking from my side. Like, I've put my heart and soul into this. So when this comes to market, you're going to be guided by it. But unlike other third-party SEO tools that are working with projection data, this is always going to be working with GSC API. This is GSC, GA data, all blended in with AI, machine learning models. And this fundamentally is going to help shape your ability to understand what is dying, understand what is gaining. You'll have an annotation system with built-in AI that will be able to tell you if the things that you're doing are helping. But in regards to your question, I can also provide templates. And you are all welcome to reach out to me on LinkedIn. I might not always reply, or I might be dreadfully slow if I'm busy, but do reach out to me. I will help as many of you as I can. So if you find that the spreadsheet is too complicated, I'll send you a template and you can dump the data into that, and I can make the template auto-populate for you. So you just put your URL export in there and it will do all the rest of it for you. So do reach out and do join my other sessions where hopefully I can provide some more insight. Right, unfortunately, I've gone past my cut-off date. I have an evening ahead for a birthday, so I do unfortunately have to wrap up today. I'm going to stop sharing now. So I thank all of you that are still here, and I hope I've given some clarity and some value for you all this evening. I will announce next week when I do an XPATHS session if you want to join it. The one thing I would really, really appreciate, and it would mean so much to me, obviously this was a free session. I'm going to mark your order as complete and you'll get a review from reviews.io. It would mean the absolute world to me if you could just leave a review. I'm trying to build SEO Audits.io as a brand. Every review I get helps, and I will give you as much help in return, and free content and other things I can help with. I'll give you that as well. So if you can leave me a review, a massive thanks. Those of you who attended and have stuck here, thank you so much. I'll let you know when the next session is, and if you want to check out any of my webinar content, do so, because I've discounted it all until Sunday this week. So feel free to go for it. I'm going to love you and leave you all. Thank you and have a lovely weekend. And the recording will be available next week. Take care.